It started with a deeply controversial compromise from him in 2019. It's scarred UK politics and EU relations ever since. But has he now cracked it? The UK government and the European Union seem to be on the verge of announcing an agreement to reform the Northern Ireland Protocol, the operation of which has brought down power sharing in Belfast and threatened a potentially disastrous economic and political breach between London and the continent.
We need to find solutions to the practical problems that the protocol is causing families and businesses in Northern Ireland, as well as address the democratic deficit.
Briefings suggest two pillars of the deal. First, a green lane for goods bound from Great Britain only to Northern Ireland, rather than bound for the rest of the island, to eliminate onerous new checks on products. Second, a role for the European Court of Justice as the ultimate arbiter of disputes over the protocol, although with attempts to ensure disputes would be unlikely to get that high. Yet the reality is that the biggest political challenge was never going to be London reaching a compromise with Brussels, but rather selling an agreement to two key groups, namely the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, and the Brexit hardliners in the Tory party's European Research Group, the ERG. The DUP have been demanding nothing short of the removal of the protocol and set out 7 tests regarding any new arrangements which, on the face of it, are uncompromising, including that they do not constitute a border in the Irish Sea and avoid any diversion of trade.
So the rhetoric about removing the Northern Ireland Protocol has been there for some time. The vast majority of DUP supporters want to see the protocol removed. Now the question is, if you reduce the frictions across the Irish Sea in customs and regulatory terms to such a degree as the Irish sea border is almost invisible, will that constitute removing the protocol? And that's where the judgment of the political leadership comes in.
And some have noted that the DUP's 7 tests do not specify anything on the role of the European Court of Justice, which is something that the Tory party's ERG has placed much more emphasis on. David Jones, the ERG's deputy chair, tweeted this morning that NI must cease to be subject to laws made in Brussels. It's as simple as that. The DUP and the ERG together present a potentially formidable barrier to delivering, perhaps even striking this deal. If the DUP reject it, then power sharing doesn't come back. If the ERG reject it, then Rishi Sunak could find his own position here in Westminster seriously undermined. But could the difference in emphasis between the two groups on what constitutes the main problem with the protocol offer an opportunity for the government?
They do have slightly different emphases. The DUP are much more concerned with the frictional costs of trade and the redirection of Northern Irish economic interests towards the south. That is true. But both of those factions in Parliament realise that they only have each other. Neither of them has many other natural allies. So the DUP have used the word colony. They are worried about Northern Ireland's legal status. They have a bigger emphasis on trade than the sort of sovereigntist purists in the ERG, but they're not miles apart.
OK, so if the government thinks it can divide and rule, to use a very crude way of looking at it, they might be mistaken.
I mean, there is maybe a very, very narrow window in which that could plausibly be the case. So, for example, if the government came back with a deal which said there is still going to be ECJ oversight, but it is only going to be for EU law, and EU law is crucially only going to apply to Northern Irish businesses that actually export to the Republic and the EU, you can see why the DUP might accept that, but some of the absolute purists in the ERG might not. But that's a very narrow landing zone.
Some signs of a decent landing today, with a generally positive reception from political leaders in Belfast to the PM's in-person briefings.
It's clear now that significant progress has been made, and we're very heartened by that.
I think it is safe to say that progress has been made across a range of areas, but there are still some areas where further work is required.
Amid the optimistic noises, it's important to remember the details of an agreement to solve the protocol headache have not yet been outlined. For now, the vexatious trade barrier down the middle of the Irish Sea remains.